Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror film, Haunted Office. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The film begins at night with a terrified employee running away from a ghost. She screams for help as she runs downstairs and leaves. However, she gets stuck in the door building, and shortly after, her blood scatters all over the glass. The scene then changes to Ken entering the same building for his interview as a computer game designer. Ken notices his friend, Pat, an investment worker, on the second floor with a group of women. He goes to her and overhears the group of women talking about a ghost story in the building. It's said that every lunar year, strange things happen, and precisely 9 employees are killed. Right then, Ken notices a beautiful worker dressed in red, looking at him as they talk. He just smiles at her and bids goodbye to Pat. Pat wishes him good luck, and when she looks back, the group of women is suddenly gone. But Pat dismisses it and goes into the elevator, where she meets a woman in white hair and clothes, crying in the corner. Pat worriedly asks if she is okay, but the white woman continues to cry and repeatedly says sorry. While working, Pat receives an email from her boss, inviting her to dinner. Pat immediately rejects his invitation, as the boss is in a hormone relationship with her coworker, Karen. Their boss is known for two-timing women and being horny all the time. After doing her water business in the restroom, Pat notices a coworker standing by the last stall. She stands there tiptoeing in her shoes and laughing creepily. Pat dismisses it and gets out, but the coworker follows her shortly. She tiptoes as she walks and smiles widely for no reason. Pat goes to the staff lounge to get water when the lights suddenly flicker. Pat screams and lets go of her cup as she sees it filled with blood instead of water. Then the lights continue to flicker as the room shakes, causing a long crack in the wall, creating the number 1. Then suddenly, the shaking stops and everything returns to normal. However, she hears someone screaming, so she immediately leaves the room and follows it. Pat joins the worker crowd and sees the woman she met in the restroom hang from the ceiling, but is still smiling widely. There is also the number 1 written on the wall. The news quickly spread like wildfire, catching the attention of the media and other workers in the building. Richard, a mean and arrogant boss of another company in the building, wants to fire his longtime employee, Madam Mary. She has been in the company for 40 years and has worked with Richard's father. Since Mary has been in the company for so long, her pension will be enormous if she retires, but Richard does not want to give it to her, so he attempts to make her resign by abusing her goodness. He instructs her to be his maid for a while. Later that night, Richard lies to his girlfriend, who's also his employee, about going to a business meeting. He then leaves for a pub, where he meets 3 of his close friends. They invite him to go with them to a place in Thailand, where gorgeous Caucasian girls go. At first, Richard does not want to go, but he agrees when his secretary offers to look after his company and fire Mary. Richard leaves the next day with his friends, leaving the secretary in charge of his company. On the other side, Pat gets confronted by Karen, accusing her of stealing her boyfriend. Before they engage in a struggle, the flirty boss stops them. However, Karen slaps him hard in his flirtatious face and does not let him explain. Later that day, in the restroom, Pat sees Karen facing the last cubicle and laughing like she's talking to someone. Pat tries to talk to her about their boss, but Karen keeps laughing and ignores her. Shortly after, Karen stops laughing and smiles widely as she leaves the restroom on her tiptoes. Out of curiosity, Pat goes in front of the last stall and looks underneath the door. However, her colleague calls and informs her that the CEO has called a meeting. While in the meeting, they suddenly hear a loud scream. They immediately go out and find Karen dead at the photocopier. She broke the machine glass, which pierced through her face. Her blood drips on the floor while the machine copies her bloody and pierced face. The number 2 is also written on the wall with Karen's blood. Pat tries to tell the investigator about her strange encounters with the 2 victims in the restroom before they killed themselves. So they check the last stall and show Pat that it has become a storage room for bathroom supplies. On the other hand, Mary volunteers to resign as she knows that Richard does not want to give her the million pensions she deserves. This confuses the secretary, so Mary explains that she does not care for the money and would have left ages ago if she did. This angers the other employees, as Mary has been like their mother in the workplace. She is thoughtful, caring, and always understanding. Mary stops her outbursts and explains that she resigned of her own free will. As compensation for her hard work in the company, the secretary offers to buy all the food at Mary's farewell party. Meanwhile, Pat goes to the bathroom on the lower floor after finding the white woman in her floor restroom. She meets a shoe worker on the 15th floor. Apparently, they have heard the stories about the restroom on the 16th floor, so the shoe worker offers to give Pat the key to theirs. Later that night, Pat and a coworker work overtime. They are the only people on the whole floor. Pat receives a call from the shoe worker, telling her that the bathroom key is in a small white envelope. Hours later, the co-worker receives a phone call informing her that her husband has been involved in a car accident. She immediately gets her thing and bids goodbye to Pat, who is now left alone in the haunted office. While working, Pat suddenly hears the sound of the photocopier. Although scared, Pat takes a flashlight with her and checks the photocopier. She finds the room empty, so she unplugs the photocopier and goes to the bathroom downstairs. However, the key does not work, so she looks for the shoe worker, as they agreed to eat together at 12. To her disappointment, the shoe worker is not there. So left with no choice, Pat returns to her floor and stops in front of the bathroom. Pat contemplates whether to go in or out, but she's too afraid. So she walks away when the door suddenly opens by itself, revealing the sound and lights of the photocopier. Pat screams in fear and runs away to hide in a room. She covers her eyes with her knuckles, but then she feels the photocopier's light beaming on her face. Pat opens her eyes and discovers that she is in the restroom. The light comes from the last cubicle, where she sees a hand slowly creeping out, terrifying her shit even more. Pat quickly runs away, accidentally running into the shoe worker, who is confused to see her screaming and terrified. Pat hides behind a door, letting the shoe worker gets killed by the ghost. Pat gets brave, takes an axe with her, and returns to the haunted restroom. She goes to the last cubicle and kicks the door, revealing the shoe worker, Karen, and a co-worker smiling at her. The shoe worker welcomes her as they have been waiting for her. The following day, a new employee finds Pat standing outside the last cubicle, smiling all by herself. Pat leaves the bathroom, looking like she has been enticed. She goes to a room and breaks the glass window, catching the attention of her coworkers. She stands at the edge, turns around at them, still smiling widely before jumping to her death. The people outside immediately surround Pat, creating a commotion. Just then, Ken enters the building, dismissing the crowd outside. While waiting for the elevator, Ken notices the white woman standing in front of another lift. Shortly after, the beautiful woman dressed in red appears and waits for the third lift. After a while, the two elevators open, and Ken chooses to be with the beautiful woman. While there, the woman in red introduces herself as Ms. Red. They both work on the 12th floor, with Ken as a toy designer, while Ms. Red is in the collection department. Ken's boss informs him about Ms. Red's boss as they reach their offices. He is known for being arrogant, a pervert, and a gossiper, but they cannot fire him, as he is the CEO brother-in-law. Ken visits Ms. Red in her department, where Ms. Red shares that her boss has been picking on her after she rejected him. Shortly after, Ms. Red's co-worker gets out of the boss's office and tells Ken that he should not be in the collection department. However, Ken is more pissed because the woman completely ignores Ms. Red like she doesn't exist. Ms. Red explains that her co-workers also like picking on her. Ken bids goodbyes as he needs to work, but he offers to pick up Ms. Red after their work. Hours later, Ken goes to her desk to fetch her. Instead, he meets her boss, who rudely shoos Ken away from his department. However, Ken is not threatened by him, and instead warns him to tell his brother about the sexual scandals in the office. This pisses off the boss, so he tries to hurt Ken, who immediately dodges his attack. Ken dominates the boss, who pleads to be freed. Ken lets him go, and the boss quickly leaves. Just then, Ms. Red appears and explains that she went to the restroom. She adds that she cannot leave work until 10 p.m. So Ken goes out to get food. As he re-enters the building, Ken sees the white woman looking at him from the second floor. Ken dismisses her and returns to the collection department to find Ms. Red crying in the corner. Ken immediately suspects the boss of hitting her, but she explains that she can see ghosts. She adds that she saw the white woman and wants Ms. Red to be her replacement. Even though Ms. Red wants to quit her job, she can't because she has to care for her family, especially her brother. Suddenly, Ms. Red sees the white woman standing across the hall from them. Ken immediately walks away to go after her, but Ms. Red stops him. She hugs him from behind, which leads to passionate minutes in tongues. On the other hand, Richard returns to work only to find that Mary is still employed. Richard immediately calls the secretary to his office to talk about Mary. The secretary explains that he tried to fire her, but he couldn't do it. The secretary tries to reason out with Richard, but Richard does not listen to him as usual. Richard then calls his girlfriend for a workout in his office. However, she refuses as she does not want everyone to hear their disturbing hormone noises. This confuses Richard as his employees are usually not dull. Later that night, Richard goes out and buys some condoms. As he gets out of the convenience store, he runs into the secretary's wife and kid. The woman suddenly expresses her hatred at Richard for disappearing and leaving his employees. Richard promptly leaves her in the streets and returns to his place, only to find Mary and his girlfriend have left. Richard quickly calls his girlfriend's place and asks where she is. However, the person on the other line says that his girlfriend has died. Richard does not believe it and quickly drops the call. Shortly after, he receives a call from his friend inviting him to the pub. At the pub, his friend informs him that 5 of his employees died in a car accident. Richard has no idea what his friend is talking about, believing it's totally bullshit. So his friend tells him that he will send an email to Richard. The following day, Richard receives an email containing news about the car accident. He opens it, revealing that it is indeed true. His employees died in the car accident. His secretary, girlfriend, Mary, and 2 other employees all died in the fatal car crash. The farewell party, supposed to be only for Mary, became a farewell accident for the 5. This creeps Richard, as his employees are now outside his office, focused on their work. He calls his friend, only to discover that he had a heart attack last night. Richard immediately leaves his office, causing the employees to suspect him of finding the truth. Richard goes to a feng shui master, who tells him that his employees still linger in his office because they have unfinished business. He gives Richard a bottle of cow's tears in order for him to see the real faces of his employees. After that, Richard leaves, coincidentally running into Ken. Ken shares all the information about Ms. Red and the white woman with the feng shui master. He warns Ken not to let ghosts control and deceive him. Also, this white woman ghost is looking for a replacement, and she wants her victim to find no reason to live. She may use money or beautiful hallucinations to tempt him into her trap. He must convince Ms. Red to quit her work and leave the haunted building. Meanwhile, Richard returns to his office, where he wipes the cow's tears to his eyes. He gets brave and looks at his employees from the blinds. Richard gasps in horror as he discovers their ghost faces still working like their usual routine. He hides behind his chair as Mary comes in carrying fresh beverages. Although scared, Richard sits on his chair as he needs to act normal. As Mary's right eye drops on his coffee glass, he cringes in disgust. Mary leaves after giving him his coffee. But then the girlfriend comes in and gives Richard a peck on the lips and cheeks. After that, the girlfriend returns to work, and Richard unconsciously drinks the coffee, but he spits it out as soon as he remembers that Mary's eye is still floating in his drink. Fed up with the scare, Richard leaves work and goes home. He hides under the sheet as someone repeatedly rings his doorbell. Richard does not open it, thinking it is his employees, but it is actually the feng shui master standing outside. The master leaves shortly after, so Richard checks the outside through the peephole. Mary suddenly appears, causing Richard to scream and hide in the closet. He anxiously listens as Mary and the girlfriend look for him. When the women walk toward the closet, Richard gets out and runs to the door. However, he gets cornered by his ghost employees. Richard foolishly pretends to faint, but he quickly breaks when his girlfriend tries to wake him up. Mary then explains that they decided to linger in the office after they died in the accident because they knew that Richard could not cope with the workload. He is the boss's arrogant son who does not know anything about business. As he is terrified of ghosts, Richard promises them that he will work hard and change himself for the business. They are satisfied with this, and so they vanish. On the other hand, Ken and Ms. Red receive an anonymous email. Ken is told to run and leave the office, while Ms. Red is instructed to go to the rooftop at 9. Mary shares that the white woman told her that she would harm her family if she did not quit. Worried about her little brother, Ms. Red takes Ken to his school. They watch him happily as he plays with other kids. They then see the white women going in and kidnapping Ms. Red's little brother. Ken immediately tries to break in to save the kid, but Ms. Red stops him. They go to the building's rooftop, where Ms. Red is pulled to the edge. She grips the rails tightly, but her hands slip off. Ken immediately jumps to save her, but then he passes through her. Ken looks at Ms. Red, who is actually a ghost who deceived him and took him as her replacement. Ken falls to his death, and the white woman shows up with the little kid. She explains that she has albinism, while her brother has schizophrenia. She has a third eye, and can see Ms. Red is the real ghost. That explains why no one ever really talked to Ms. Red, and the group of women he found on his first day are actually ghosts. The woman only works at night, and the white woman feels guilty and sorry for those people who do not know they are about to die. Ken's death fulfills the building's curse, as he is the 9th employee who died this year in this building. The film ends with Ken finding his replacement to reincarnate in the elevator, indicating that the building's curse has begun its new cycle. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.